Welcome to the Relationship Manifesto. This is episode 6 in the podcast series, which actually covers chapter 5 of the book. And I'm getting very confused. We've got out of step because we had an introduction, and I get confused very, very easily.
It's your age, Chris.
Thank you. And it's my unfortunate pleasure to be here with Dr. Stephen Whitehead, who's going to talk about the book, of course, and about that particular chapter. This particular chapter, the 3 identities in every relationship. And Stephen, I introduce him in each podcast as an academic, an author, a relationship coach, and a researcher. But I want to change it. Stephen.
You do?
Yes. When you go to a party and you meet somebody for the first time, and you've never talked to them before, and they say to you, Stephen, what do you do? What's your answer?
It depends if they're male or female.
Oh, okay. Give me both.
Okay.
Give me both.
Well, I think the sexy aspect of what I do is a relationship coach, because that always interests women, because obviously most women, if not all of them, are interested in relationships and the complexities on. If I'm doing something which is a bit more ordinary, if you like, or intellectual, then I'll talk about my academic work, my writing, books. But all of it gives me a buzz. I enjoy all of it. But
Yes.
I can present myself in different ways. I'm a different people at different times, as my friends know.
Chameleon.
Absolutely, yeah.
A chameleon. So, chapter 5, the saga continues. The 3 identities in every relationship. Do you have your 60 seconds elevator pitch?
Okay.
About what the chapter is about?
Basically, what this chapter talks about is these 3 identities, and the 3 identities are you, your partner, and the relationship yourself. And the main point I want to get over in this chapter is that the relationship itself has its own life, its own energy, its own identity, and that itself is changing. So to go into a relationship imagining that it's all about us or all about our partner is a big mistake, or even all about just us two. When you're in a relationship with anybody, and this counts for same-sex relationships as well as it does for heterosexual relationships, the point is that the relationship itself gets created out of the dynamic between the 2 people.
Okay. Thanks for that. So we're going to focus in the next 30 minutes, or maximum of 30 minutes, on the you identity, the partner identity, and the relationship identity. Is that right?
Yeah. The main theme that I want to bring out here is the contingency, the uncertainty, because if you can imagine you've got 3 identities in that relationship, that just illustrates the complexity of this, the dynamic that's going on. None of this is totally controllable. We can't even control our own actions, never mind the actions of another person. And we certainly can't control the dynamic of a relationship that's in constant state of flow, shifting with a life of its own. So we have to go into relationships aware of that factor, not being phased when things change, not being unsettled when we're on that roller coaster at times, because all relationships have the roller coaster, and it can be very exciting but also very unsettling. And not being blasé when it's very settled, because all relationships have the time when they are settled, when they feel predictable, when they feel constant, when you've got a sense of, I know what's coming next. Let me tell you, you do not know what's coming next. None of us know what happens tomorrow. That is the lesson, a key lesson of life. So we're living in this state of unpredictability. This is one aspect of the book which does not necessarily relate directly to the modern age. All relationships throughout time have had this unpredictability about them. However, because of the way modern life is, maybe more stressful, it's certainly quicker, it's certainly got many more. We've certainly got many more options and choices open to us about how we live our life, where we live our life, who we live our life with, the sort of careers and identities we develop. All this creates the possibility of change, not only in us, but also in the relationship.
In the chapter itself, in the book itself, in the chapter, is the chapter split into 3 distinct parts to cover these 3 identities, or does it all sort of meld into one discussion?
it melds into one discussion, because what I'm trying to emphasize here, that this, one of the hardest lessons we've got in life is that we're always on our own. We never ever are completely with anybody else. And now, if you're single already and you've been living on your own for years, then you probably already know this or have a sense of it. But the point is, do you really know that? We're all secretly, if we are alone, often we can be secretly hoping that we can get into a big love relationship and thereby not be on our own any longer. And that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's entirely natural and reasonable. But the point I want to make, and it comes out in the way in this chapter is structured, is if we go from being single to being in a partnership, we're still on our own. We still have to have our own life journey.
Even with your soulmate?
Even with your soulmate.
Soulmates are special people, right?
Soulmates are special people, but even with your soulmate, you are two people who've come together and you are sharing, and you're still, with the soulmate relationship, you're still creating this third identity, which is the relationship itself. So, in the end, we're each of us following this own particular life journey, and that's not going to change whether we're married or single. And it's important here to recognise that all this suggests that the relationship in the modern age, if it is more stressful, or there's more options and choices open to us, and it needs to be about balance. It's about sharing rather than giving. The other theme of this chapter is that even if it's a soulmate, don't imagine just because you love someone and that person is your soulmate, you shouldn't imagine that you should give all your life for them. Good relationships are not about sacrifice of one person for the other. The point is, you both have to share your lives together, and you have to share your hopes and aspirations. And at times, you have to put yourself first. I think it's a real danger to subsume your own identity under that of your partner. At the same time, you should not subsume your partner's identity under yours. You have to allow for the fact that life is fluid and everything around us is transient. What you've got to try and do is protect this third entity, this third identity, which is the relationship. And the key way to protect that relationship is through communication, trust, and sharing one's life. Now, that's something I'm going to talk about in a future podcast. But this identity that is the relationship can also be reinforced through what I call life projects. Now, I've seen this both in my own relationships and with many others. The life project could be building a home together. It can be raising and having children. It can even be adversity, because we all meet adversity in our life. This is the experience of living. Now, if you meet that adversity together, even if that adversity, whatever it might be, financial, health, whatever, even if that adversity is debilitating and unsettling and worrying, if you share it, that will reinforce the third identity relationship itself. So life projects, what I call life projects, are very, very important to reinforcing the third identity. But it's out of that energy of both people coming together, overcoming difficulties, that this relationship identity gets reinforced, made real.
This sounds like I'm trying to map that onto some other experiences, and is that the same as the basketball coach approach? And the basketball coach who has a team, who is not coming together, is not working as a team.
Yeah.
And one strategy for that basketball coach is to get everybody to hate him, because then they have a common goal. Their common goal is, we hate this guy.
We hate the guy.
And the irony is, because with that one focus, they actually do come together as a team.
Whatever it takes, I think, if you find out what works for you. I mean, I know some people can't handle adversity. They get stressed out very quickly. They get over-emotional, and they often take it out on the partner. Bad. Do not do that. You have to share it. And you have to share it in a calm and loving and open way. You have to share it through communication and trust.
That's easily said. That's more easily said than done, though, isn't it? How do you prepare? How do you do that? How can you step aside almost from the relationship and be able to almost address it intellectually, which is what you're doing, isn't it?
I think the first step here is be calm. Be calm in yourself. And if you're calm in yourself, you create an energy around you which is calm. That gets picked up in the house. It gets picked up in the environment. If you are constantly on edge, irritable, bad-tempered, even violent, or offering the threat of violence, these are all really negative energies in any household. And in that situation, you cannot get to the point of sharing communication and openness in a balanced way. You don't even get to that point. Consequently, the relationship is never fully developed. It's not strong enough. One person ends up, we talked about last in previous podcasts about what we call the vampire or draining relationship.
Yes.
You know, that's the sort of environment where those sorts of relationships come to be. So we're talking about a calm environment, a calm approach, where you sit down with your partner and say, look, I want to talk about this, I want to share this. Every kind word is a brick building a positive, healthy relationship. Every harsh word takes that brick away. So language is important. Again, I want to talk about communication in a later podcast, but it's calmness is the beginning. Be calm in yourself. And I mean, I do talk in the book about ways of achieving that, and there are practical ways, and many people listening to this will be aware of them, and the one that I've used in my life to good effect is meditation. It's just been having a quiet mind. If you haven't got a quiet mind, you're not listening, because if your mind's busy, if there's too much noise going on in your head, you cannot get to the stage of being intuitive. And we all have intuition. We all have that sense of having a feeling that something's right or something's wrong. If you haven't got the quiet mind, then you're not going to be calm, you're not going to be intuitive, and that's a weakness. That creates a weakness in the relationship.
In an earlier podcast, you mentioned that I can't remember whether you talked about philosophy or religion, but being a Buddhist. And it sounds like if you're a Buddhist, you've got this cracked anyway, right?
Well, okay. Many Buddhists don't meditate, and there are many people who are not Buddhists who meditate. Meditation corresponds across all religions, all the major religions. The practitioners are encouraged to meditate and be calm. It's just that over the centuries, meditation has become more closely associated with Buddhism, and it's, to be sure, you and I know many temples out here where meditation is regularly practiced. I know that meditation doesn't make for a perfect person, but it creates the environment which is settled. It helps create the environment which is settled, and life is uncertain. This is an element of Buddhism. You know, life is uncertain. We don't know what comes next. It's contingent. It's fluid. It's dynamic. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's not good. How do you cope with all that? How do you cope with not knowing what's going to happen when you wake up in the morning? Because none of us truly do. We might have a routine, a habit, but we're not for sure know what's going to happen. You know, who would have predicted? We're speaking now at the time, a week after the tragedy in northeastern Japan. Nobody saw that coming. Nobody saw that, devastating earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear disaster that's followed on from that. We didn't see it. We have to deal with it, and it's also these are we're all touched by it. So these are emotional times through media and communication. We all see tragedy on the screens, television, internet. Remaining calm in all this is absolutely key. Meditation's just one way. People will have other ways. But I do counsel against the chemical way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, we all like a drink and all the rest of it. But if the chemical way, which can become addictive, then you slip into routine, a practice of life which is going to mitigate against being calm. And then you come to rely on the chemical. But meditation is very healthy. I would advise everybody to do it.
What about the solution in... I think it's more of a Western solution than an Eastern solution of, is that third, maybe it's not just you, your partner in the relationship. What about people who are marriage counsellors and general counsellors that seem to be used more over the last sort of, 30 years
Sure.
than used to be the case? How do they fit into this?
Well, in the UK, I can't speak for other parts of the world, but I know in the UK there's an excellent organisation called Relate, RELATE, and they've got offices in pretty much every town and city in the country, and these are trained counsellors who who you can go to explore some issues in your relationship, whatever they might be. And the point about the Relate system is that they're there to ask questions and to listen. They're not there to give advice. They won't say what you should do. All the Relate counsellor will do is create an environment where both parties, who may be at loggerheads, maybe in an antagonistic situation, can come into a neutral space, talk to a stranger who will operate in total privacy and with discretion, and talk to them about whatever the issues are in the relationship. And that all the Relate person is doing is being the fulcrum, if you like, being the point by which both parties can share without immediately getting into the habit or the ritual of rowing and arguing. But these have become quite common, and they're very helpful. However, I think the other point I would make is that most relationships have their own life span. Now, in the way that an individual has his or her lifespan, so does a relationship. A relationship does have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And what is important is recognizing when that end's coming, and allow it to let it go.
But does the end? But does the end come suddenly, or does it fade? I have to share this. I want to share this with you. I have a picture in my head at the moment. There's me and my partner sat on the sofa, and next to us on the sofa is this spectre, which I'm now calling the relationship.
Good.
And
it's working.
And I now have this image of over a period of time, of course, there's a sell by date, that the spectre, day by day, starts to fade.
Well, that's if it fades, it'll only fade because you and your wife will allow it to fade. It'll fade because you change, because your wife changed, or I change and my wife changes, or the listener's wife or partner changes. Relationships will come to an end at some point, and ultimately we all die, and people live on their own. As widows or widowers, people move on. They travel. They have other career projects or life projects that they want to explore by themselves, and all of this is entirely natural. This is the richness of life. We shouldn't hold on to a relationship after it's expired, and it's recognizing that it's getting a feeling for it and letting go. Now I want to come back to the relate issue. The relate counsellors cannot create longevity in a relationship. They cannot make a relationship that's coming to a natural end last another decade. It's not what they're there for. All they're there for, and this applies to all relationship coaching. All you're there for is to listen, is to be a reflection or a sounding board for concerns, ideas, issues. Allowing that person to explore them, come out with them, reflect on them. It's the relationships don't have to go on forever. And the other point I would make in this is that one of the big myths of modern relationships, and one of the myths that this book seeks to disabuse, is the idea that an ended relationship is a failed relationship. Don't even use the word failure. This is not failure, it's just change. You are not going to avoid change, either in yourself, in your partner, or in the relationship. Be calm, allow change to happen, share, talk, communicate, be open, create a trusting environment, and it will work out okay, even if the relationship comes at some point to its natural conclusion.
You make it sound very natural. I have a slightly different philosophy. In a relationship, you have to invest time and effort into it. Relationships aren't I don't see relationships as a right. I see relationships are often earned. So I do work on relationships. They don't just happen for me. Am I weird?
No, I think you're right. You've been married, what, 25 years or so, and you have a relationship, and it works, and you've created your own unique relationship with your wife, and that's. But without me asking any questions or without anybody else intruding, you've got this third entity, which is visible pretty much only to you and your wife, as I've got my third entity, which is visible to me and my wife. We know what we've created, and we're in the process of creating it every day. It's an ongoing project, this. That doesn't, and it does take work, you're absolutely right, but at the same time, I don't know none of us know what's around the corner. None of us know how we will change. I know I've got a good idea who I am today, sitting here doing this interview. I haven't got a clue who I'm going to be in 5 years' time. There may be issues come into my life I've got to deal with about work or location or health. I don't know. And when we change, and we are changing constantly, then so will the relationship. And this is especially true for young people in the 20s and 30s, who, you're not the same person at 20 as you're going to be at 40. Absolutely not. And if you're into a strong relationship, a loving relationship, even a soulmate relationship at 25, and how long, just don't expect you to be the same and the dynamic of the relationship to continue evenly settled in some settled way for the next 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. It will not do.
What about can I ask you about the rate of change? Because I imagine that it seems logical with my physics background, as in an earlier age, is that when you're younger, the rate of change is faster than when you get older. So, like the change in me when I was a teenager and into early 20s, it changed an awful lot. But now, if I look at 5 years now, the change that would happen over 5 years, I don't think would have been as dramatic as between the ages of 18 and 23. Does that have any?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, you and I both been in education for a long time, and I've been a lecturer and teacher of young people for many years. I see the years between 18 and 20 as particularly rapid. They are particularly significant. For many people now around the world, those years are when they're going to go into university. And I see, having taught in universities for a long time, I see those years, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Very dramatic, very profound changes. This is when young people are looking to assert their adulthood, independent of their family. It's not they don't love their mother and fathers, don't want to be with them all the time. They want to stand on their own. They want to explore, they want to experiment, they want to find out who they are in terms of their identity, their sexuality, their career possibilities, their intellect, all this. Fascinating time. And that momentum does keep going for quite some time. I think certainly nowadays, because we're living so much longer, it was decades ago, it was the case that we were looking at old age by the time we got to 45. Now we're barely into middle age, and the rapidity of change continues. Let me give you another example of this: is careers. There aren't going to be many people, young people particularly, listening to this who can expect to have one career all their life, who can expect to live in one house all their life, who can expect to live in one location all their life. So what are the implications of that? It's movement, physical movement, emotional movement, new relationships, new contacts, new friendships, expanded social network, saying goodbye to some friends, meeting some new ones. All this is the dynamic of life for modern people, for modern relationships, certainly in the developed and developing world. So change has always been a characteristic of life. That's not new. But what we're seeing today is rapid change, not least in technology. Things are happening around us in terms of technology. You know far better than I that that we can't keep very few of us can keep a grasp of it.
Yes.
We're always a few steps behind,
Yes.
and it's as if life is changing beyond our control, and and it is. It's only, but it always has done. It's just that nowadays we sense it maybe more acutely.
I always have a lot of admiration for, I want to say, people in the real world, as opposed to people who are in an enclosed academic environment. When I reflect on my life, being in an enclosed academic environment with tenure most of the time, and you're safe and you can see you there for a long while. But the number of friends who I have who have said, well, actually, we don't keep much on our desk at work because we could actually be told, sorry, you're on your bike, you've lost your job and you've got to move on tomorrow. And it never and those friends that were in that situation, it never stressed them to move, or it didn't appear to stress them in the same way as I would imagine it would have stressed me had somebody simply said, I'm sorry, your job's over now and you've got to go out on the road and find something else. But I've always had a great deal of admiration for people in the real world.
Okay, let me come in because I think there'll be a lot of people listening to that who are living and working in the world of academia, of education, and I know who will think, oh well, I'm very much living in the real world now. And I think what we've seen, even in the last few years, and certainly in the West, and certainly in the UK and the States, is increased insecurity for everybody working in the public sector and working in HE and schools, higher education schools, universities particularly. Many job losses, increased pressures to meet targets, increased stress. It's been building up for a good many years. I mean, I saw the beginnings of this probably about 1990 when I first worked in further education in the UK. And it was, but working university life was pretty immune from it, I have to say.
Yes.
Not now, absolutely not. All the universities now are under pressure. Education is under pressure. I don't think there's anywhere now that's immune.
Yes.
I think that was the case. I think you're right to point that out. I think that was the case in the past. But education's certainly not immune. And the dropout rate with teachers now in secondary and primary education is very worrying. Young people coming through, newly trained teachers,
Yes.
staying in it for 12, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, and then coming out saying, I don't want this.
Yes.
It's also increasingly difficult now to get head teachers in schools in the UK because even though they're highly paid, often with salaries over £100,000 a year,
Yes.
they still cannot get head teachers because of the stress that goes with it. Now, these are all, I don't want to go into the educational setup, but basically all this illustrates that there is nowhere, no part of life,
Nowhere safe.
nowhere safe. If you want to save, then maybe come to Chiang Mai. But we are lucky. We are living in a fairly settled environment. But you and I both know that things can happen here that they're outside our control, and we just have to respond to them.
How about we're coming to the end of the 30 minutes. I still have this picture of me and my wife sat on the sofa with this ghostly thing.
Yeah, you'll have to give it a name, Chris.
Oh no, maybe I should get one of those stuffed teddy bears and sit it in the other chair. And that stuffed teddy bear is a relationship.
Yeah.
In fact, that could be a coping strategy.
It could be.
Think?
It could be a
Is
coping strategy.
Is to.
I'll think about that. Maybe put it in the book. Good idea.
Any practical advice? You've given some practical advice already. I didn't know about Relate in the UK. They're presumably an affordable organisation.
It's very affordable. I mean, I think there's some low cost involved if you do a series of you commit to a series of meetings with the counsellor, and you'll be allocated one counsellor for that series, which could be 4, 5, 6, maybe more. It's low cost and affordable. Yeah, it operates as a charity.
So with the 3 identities, me and my soulmate, and this spectre called the relationship, what practical advice can we have to? I was going to say control the relationship. I think you probably pick up control the relationship is the wrong thing to say.
It is. Yeah, don't even begin to control it. You have to be in the moment, and my practical advice is you have to create an environment of calm in the house. And if one of you is not contributing to that calmness, then you have to look at that and explore it and discuss it and try and deal with it. It's not that you're going to avoid stress. That's a different issue. You're not going to avoid uncertainty, but you do have to create a calm environment. And I would advise both parties to seek ways of being calm. You take time out together. You go out on walks. You maybe do hobbies together. You have quiet time. You have times when the television and computers are not on, that you're just quietly reading or talking. You create an environment where it's human and it's not fraught, argumentative, certainly not violent. The other message here is you have to be a little bit selfish to be a good partner. I don't see strong relationships built on imbalance, where one party is always taking and the one's always giving. So you have to accept you have particular needs, and you have to protect them. A good solid relationship, one that's going to withstand 21st century pressures, is going to be built on balance. So you have your own identity, and just as much as your partner does. This process arises through negotiation. You have to talk and communicate.
Yes.
And this is something that I'll explore more fully in another podcast. Don't go into any relationship telling yourself that you always put your partner first, that you will fully commit to him or her. It's the wrong approach. It will just end up backfiring on you. But the main issue, the main one, is protecting this relationship through communication, trust, sharing in a calm way, and being prepared for change. Accepting it's going to be a characteristic of your relationship. Believe me, it's a characteristic of every relationship. It's a characteristic of life. We don't know what comes next, and we certainly don't know how the relationship's going to develop over a period of time.
Yes. Sounds like we have to send the whole world on an active listening course.
I think if we had 6.5 billion people meditating regularly, I think we'd be in a whole lot better situation than we're in at the moment. But anyway.
Now I was going to say that would be a good place to start, but I can't resist asking another question.
Okay.
And the other question would be, we have 3 identities. What about children? Because children would be a 4th identity, right?
No. This is something that again, it's one of the myths of relationships, that you always put children first. Do not put your children first. You put yourself first. You put the relationship first. The children are not important, in so much as that they are not the be-all and end-all of the relationship. If you're not settled, if you're not calm, if you're not happy, if you're not in a loving relationship with your partner, your children are stressed. Your children cannot be happy and settled in that sort of environment. You put yourself first in order to protect your children. This is not about ignoring your children. It's not about not loving your children. You give your children love in a completely non-judgmental, open, full-on way. But you have to protect yourself, your own life journey, and your partner and the relationship. You create a good, solid, calm relationship that your children can live in. Your children are not the 4th relationship. They're the project that brings you all together.
Well, I think that's... I'm hoping some of the listeners are thinking about this and going, that's a bit contentious. And if you are thinking it's contentious, remember we have the blog, relationshipmanifesto.posterous.com, and you as a listener have the opportunity there. Every episode has an area where you can comment. And if you wanted to pick up that, I think that was quite a contentious. For me, it was quite contentious and quite a difficult one. But if you as a listener want to comment on it, please do, and we will look at the comments following each podcast. And maybe that would be the right place to stop.
Remember this: that your relationship with your partner, your loved one, your husband, wife, is going to go on long after your kids leave home. Kids grow up quick. Intellectually, they're gone by about 16 anyway. You have to change your relationship with your children from being a parent to being a parent pal. This is very important, and you need to have done that by the time they get to 17 or 18. If you've not got an equitable, balanced relationship with your child by the time they get to adulthood, you're probably not going to ever have one. You have to let your children go into adulthood in a proper way, in an open way. However, they will fly. They will leave. Your relationship will continue.
So leave your comments on the blog, and we will come back to them. So that brings us to the end of this episode 6, which was to do with chapter 5, the 3 identities in every relationship. Hopefully you've subscribed to iTunes, and there's a button on the blog, so you're getting these podcasts automatically each weekend. The next chapter, which is chapter 6, is called "Who is the one?" in quotation marks in your life, and we'll address that next weekend. So I hope, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you enjoyed that 30 minutes of contention. Thanks very much. Have fun. See you next time.